Yeah, our team has got a lot of support. That's for sure. Thank you very much, Jade, for your charming introduction. Hello, everybody. Also online. Love the lens and all that. So very, very cool. There's probably no better place to be than here over the past couple of days. You know, it's been quite an event. My head is buzzing, even though I think I'm a bit of an imposter, perhaps in two ways. On the one hand, you know, looking at the eclectic company I'm finding myself in, you know, I'm probably at the lower end of research activity, which is fair to say. And everybody's topic related to law and regulation in some ways, whereas mine is more about teaching and learning, and especially during the pandemic. But hopefully there's something there that chimes with some of you, at least, and we'll see how it goes. I should mention Mia Agnew, who is now a stage 2 LLB student at RGU, who's usually my sidekick when we talk about what I'm going to talk about here. Because she's made quite a significant contribution to what is to come, and also you know, she's taking this forward as build on it as part of her role as a school student officer to build a more of a law school community, which brings students and staff a bit closer together. So that's the start. Let's see how it goes. Where do I click? Where do I press? Okay, you live and learn. Very good. Just a wee plan. Always like a bit of a plan. Whether I stick to it, that's anybody's guess. Usually, but you know, I think it's fair to say that what I'm going to talk about is a personal reflection. Sometimes perhaps a little bit too personal, but let's see what you think. And I use the contract law cohort of 2021, you know, as a basis for my little contribution here. During where we were at the time of crisis, you know, what was teaching like at those times, and also what did it mean for connections or the connectivity between students and tutors. So all under the umbrella of social health. That brings me to some experts, you know, there's quite a bit of literature with regard to online study and social health there, which is, I think, quite useful, which then brings me on to the centerpiece, which is the virtual happy hour. You know, had to give it some name, and I'll talk to you about why that kind of struck a chord with me, which I introduced in order to build a little bit more of an opportunity to have conversations with the students, and also hopefully make a contribution to everybody's social health. Whether that worked, proof is in the pudding. Students' views will be there, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hopefully more of the good rather than the latter. And also some personal reflections from me on the concept, and perhaps what that means for online teaching in the future. So I was looking for an anchor to base all this on in terms of a research methodology, and Roy and Wekusa kind of jumped to my rescue a little bit, because, you know, whenever, you know, there's personal reflections, sometimes seems to be a little bit flimsy and a bit you know, rough around the edges perhaps as well, but they undertook a bit of a justification effort for qualitative research during the pandemic, which is based on individual and collective reflection. I lived through experience, and using that as a basis for an argument and for discussion, which is underpinned by research. So hopefully that is sufficient as a justification. And that brings me to, well, the August 2020 it was, when we were still kind of flapping about, and nobody really knew what teaching was going to look like in September 2020. And universities, I think, had a couple of options at the time. Either shift everything online, which I think a lot of universities did, or, you know, embark on a more hybrid kind of delivery, i.e., you know, where we bring students, at least for a little bit of teaching on campus. And I think there were probably from a university RGU perspective, which chose the hybrid path, were a couple of concerns there. The first concern was that the students, especially the undergraduates, signed up to an in-person experience. And so therefore, that's what we should give them to some extent as far as possible. And the other concern from, probably fair to say, from senior management is, well, when we see a big empty campus, buildings that are not occupied by anybody, tumbleweeds through Garth D on the River D, that is not a good impression to have. It all costs money, and you really want to have a little bit of buzz around the place as far as possible. So you understand all these concerns, and I think that led to the decision that we were going down the hybrid path. And while that discussion was going on, of course, seminar rooms and venues were made COVID-proof. Nobody knew what that looked like. And then everything was revealed. Timetables arrived, you know, and I thought, well, I better go and have a look and see what these rooms look like, you know. So now all COVID-proof. And then the shock hit me. And when I walked into one of our 120-seaters theaters, X marks the spot, loads of panic buttons there, about 112, if I counted correctly, which now was turned into a seminar room housing 10 students. And there's the lectern at the bottom, of course, which meant that was my place. Now you can see I'm twitching, I'm a walker. So if you pin me down to a lectern for too long, you know, that doesn't do me much good. And for seminar teaching, I just saw barriers, nothing else. The rows are always barriers, but also, you know, if the first impression is don't sit here, then, you know, and that shocks me as a teacher, then, you know, the student view must be pretty drastic and negatively affected as well. If that is in-person teaching, then I think, you know, that to me that threw up a number of question marks. And, you know, as I said, I'm not criticizing senior management. You know, these decisions had to be made and government regulation had to be followed. But what teaching actually on the floor looked like was perhaps a little bit of an afterthought to some extent. So from my perspective, then, you know, the big concern was if this is seminar teaching and smaller rooms looked the same, you know, social distancing, 2 meters apart, masks on, nobody move. You know, how do I build up rapport with students? You know, there has to be a bit of buzz about the place, but there was none, of course, and there was likely to be very little. So how to galvanize the place a bit, and how to stimulate conversations. And of course, especially first-year students, they came already in from schools where their learning was disrupted, exams were a disaster, you know, and now they should transition to higher education into our world. So very, very difficult. My concern was also how to gauge progress of students. You know, if there's very little engagement, very little conversation, you know, how am I meant to gauge where students are? And then don't get me started about hybrid teaching, which threw yet another spanner into the works. So you know, retention was there as a principle. The university said we need to get students on campus, otherwise we'll lose them. If will we hang on to them if they walk into rooms like this? Not too sure. So something had to be done. For me, it was completely uncharted territory. I thought I knew what I was doing in the classroom, but this really kind of threw me into a state of shock, to be honest with you. And the big concern was immediately, you know, today and yesterday there were great examples here where we had an opportunity to have these wee conversations, you know, tap somebody on the shoulder and have a wee word. And that's what you used to do, to have these conversations with students, you know, outside the classroom as well, when you bumped into them, or at the end of a tutorial, or at the end of a lecture, whatever the event was. None of that was really possible. You know, people were parachuting in campus and then leaving again hurriedly. Nobody really wanted to stay, so it wasn't great. So, you know, I'm preaching to the converted here. You all know what social health is, of course, and it's all about social relationships and building meaningful relationships. You know, becoming resilient through those conversations as well. You know, being creating a community. For us, that meant the learning community, and also, have this supportive network, with regard to friends and family. But in an educational context, it's, peers and fellow tutors, of course, as well. So that got me thinking, what could we perhaps do about it? Is it only me who's thinking about this? No, of course not. They're experts. They're always experts, which is great, because they give us a little bit more flesh on those bones. And the first 4 are probably concerned with online study with regard to students who chose to study online. But there, are some of the buzzwords around building a community, having a sense of belonging, through engagement, digital competencies, which is a big topic on itself, which also applies to staff. And I would say everything on this slide probably to some extent applies to tutors as well. And then the focus on student stress and online study, which was then galvanized or built upon by Elmar, who I think was the first study that looked at student stress in the context of COVID. And there you had the big things coming out: anxiety, loneliness, depressive symptoms, all sorts of negative connotations here, of course. And that really got me got the thinking cap on, what could I do in order to counter some of these things? I need a webinar. Everybody's doing webinars. That's fantastic. Let's do a webinar. But as a hook, webinar, that's a bit meh, isn't it? Could it be? What could it be? And was walking through the fields south of Aberdeen, thinking, could it be? What could it be? For some reason, I started to think about the house martins and happy hour. Don't know why. It must have been on the radio that day or something. So, here's something: a happy hour, a contract law happy hour. Now here you say, this is a no-go, because contract law and happiness, very uneasy bedfellows. Perhaps I don't understand, but I think it's a great idea. Others, come on, that's a bit enough. But I thought, well, it seems to be a hook. Let's get running with it. Contacted the timetabler. At a week's notice, I need weekly, hourly happy hours. What? Happy hours? Yes, that's what we need. Friday afternoon, 1 o'clock, just before the deadly slot at 3 o'clock, where nobody really wants to be anywhere. But that was amongst the many small tutorial groups that students had to go to. That was the one slot that seemed to be available. That was great. And I thought, I need to timetable it, to give it a cloak of it being mandatory, even though it was not mandatory. But once it's on a timetable, got better chance for students to actually come along. And it also gives a sense of regularity and consistency. So that, for me, that was really good. And I thought, initially I thought what I want to do there in those happy hours is to troubleshoot, question and answer, looking back to the week that was, looking forward to the week that comes. But quickly in conversations with students, I found out, well, let's draw in some of the guest speakers, that they were alluded to at course induction, weeks ago sometimes, study skills. So we recruited guest speakers from student support at pertinent points where it helped, because courseworks were on the agenda. We drew in alumni to give an idea as to pathways with regard to legal careers. The Student Law Society came in and recruited, used it as a recruitment drive for their society. The Law Clinic as well, came in. So every happy hour had a kind of agenda to it, which was communicated, had a point to it, and it also made sure that it was not me who did all the talking. And so the Q&A was very open. It was a Zoom call, I should add as well, which was very positive, because Zoom became integrated with Moodle, our VLE. And that meant that the little black boxes that you saw had all names on them, not Mum's iPad or something like that. So that was really good. So even though, students were understandably reluctant to switch their cameras on, you knew who was in the room. And that kind of opened up the spectrum for a little bit of warmth there as well, for a little bit of personality, perhaps, and or individuality, and the chat was also useful to to integrate students who didn't want to talk verbally or audio or use audio, and the chat was moderated or looked on by one of the students. So it was not all done by myself. It was really devolved into different different hands. So, and then we saw how it went. I must say it was all ad hoc. It was not planned. It was extra time that I gave up. So it wasn't part of any workload management or anything. But I didn't really care about that, because I thought I need something to get students at least speaking to me or give them an opportunity. So what did students think about it? Well, your first question will be, did they actually turn up? And I should have put some facts and figures on one of the slides. And it's fair to say that participation varied. Here they say, told you so, But the dips are explainable. Perhaps we usually had about 80% of a cohort of 80 students, which wasn't so bad. But that dipped to 40% whenever coursework were due and so on. After week 6, things kind of ebbed off a little bit, but then before the exams, predictably, last couple of sessions we went up again, and module reflection that worked really well, and that's where Mia came in, and that final session on module reflection, where I disappeared and she had a conversation with the students, what they thought about the virtual happy hour. Did that help? And what did they make of it? So that information plus student evaluation questionnaires, where you usually get more of the ugly and the bad rather than the good, but there were some good bits there as well. Direct emails to me, that functioned as some sort of databases to reflect on. So some headliners were, overall, students really liked it, which was positive. Sometimes they didn't quite understand why particular guest speakers were coming in, but for example, with regard to the alumni that I mentioned, or a fellow academic or something like that. So you live and learn, and you probably can pitch these things better. But generally, they really took a lot out of that. And Guido was kind enough to come in with regard to a different module, consumer law and policy, on World Consumer Day. But Guido speaking to our consumer law students about his project that he's involved in, that we heard about this morning. Went down really, really well. Even though the cohort was quite small, but it's these kind of opportunities that really, added a bit of oomph to the whole thing. The meet and mingle with peers. I think the social networking that was going on. Okay, it was slow at the beginning, but once the trust was built, and I think that's where the third bullet comes in. Students saw this as a trust builder. Confidence grew. And there were conversations, not only between students and myself, but also between students. And getting answers directly there and then when they asked them, rather than having to wait for an email, that was really well received too. Specifics, huge confidence boost, according to the students. They were really uncertain at the start, but going through the module, contract law being one of the first substantive modules that they ever do, they really found it helpful as a consolidation of learning aspect as well. And of course, having a conversation with peers, sometimes the study tips that they would share as part of the event as well, all ended up developing a sense of community. And that's something that I really hadn't thought about that much, but that was a really strong message that was coming out from there. So what about me? Well, was there anything in it for me? Always like to get something out of it, of course. Otherwise, why would we be doing teaching if you didn't get anything out of it? Might as well just drive a truck of bricks from A to B and let things be done by others. Yeah, I think there were things in it for me which I hadn't thought about, and that's perhaps what some would call the ripple effect of things that were not thought about as a consequence. And a nightmare photograph that was. A new meaning to 2 + 2. 2 people in the kitchen trying to work, and 2 people, smaller people, doing homework while being homeschooled as well, all at the same time at the same place. That was a challenge. And that brings me back to Elmer when you talked about student stress. This was highly stressful for me, you know, and for many colleagues who were in a similar situation, didn't have the luxury of a home office or a separate room or anything like that. You know, there was angst, anxiety galore. You know, will the students get it? You know, will they stay on board? Will they talk to me? Well, you know, what will the results look like at the end? All these worries, you know, and it was all good. It was something I looked really forward to. Friday, 1 o'clock, I knew, oh, there's a highlight of the week. Not that I belittle the family, of course, great to have had family time so close together all the time. But it was all good because there was this happy hour at the end, and you know, that gave us a little bit of an outlet to do something a bit different with different people, which was fabulous in my view, and it improved my social health immeasurably. I have to say. Yeah. Okay. How much have I got? Minus 30 seconds.
20 minutes. Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm coming to the conclusion. So it's I think for me that was a huge benefit, a huge plus. Made a real addition to my life. So timely conclusion. Somehow timed this reasonably well here. So what is there to take away from it? Well, I think it's the happy hour for me seemed to act as a putty to hold the whole thing together, you know, at a time of great stress. And since I've used it in online teaching as well, where it was never part of course design. And that's probably a point that I want to make here, you know, with, you know, we're all going back to normal and I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet. People will be on campus again, we will have all these conversations. But, you know, with regard to online teaching, there's probably room for a little bit more informality, for a bit more social space, for a little bit more empathy, perhaps as well. And if a happy hour like that, a virtual happy hour like that can help, then I think we should probably try to build it in. Don't go breaking our bond. Here it is at the end. Try to have to make something with a label of this little presentation here. So thank you very much for listening.